Before we begin, I want you to take a moment to slow down, to breathe, to let the noise of the world fade until all that remains is the quiet truth inside you. Every trader thinks they are reading the market, but most of the time they are reading their expectations, their assumptions, their first ideas, their anchors. Anchoring bias is one of the most silent traps in trading psychology. It doesn't shout, it doesn't shake you. It simply locks your mind onto a number, a level, a target, and convinces you it must be right even when the market has already moved on. This session is not about strategy. It's about perception, about the beliefs beneath your decisions, about the expectations that shape your reactions, about the anchors you didn't know were controlling you. If you've ever felt stuck, if you've ever held a target too long, if you've ever watched the market change while you stayed the same, then this message is for you. Welcome to Mind Over Markets. Let's go deeper. I want to begin with a truth I resisted for years, a truth that quietly shaped my trading decisions long before I ever noticed it, a truth that controlled me much more than the market ever did. I wasn't trading the chart in front of me, I was trading the number in my mind, a number I clung to, a number I trusted far more than I should have, a number that became a kind of psychological anchor dragging every decision down with it. Maybe it was my entry price, maybe it was the target I set before the market opened, maybe it was a level I had drawn hours or even days earlier, maybe it was a high, a low, a Fibonacci line, a previous pivot, anything that my mind grabbed onto and labeled as important. And once my mind locked onto that number, it didn't matter how the market evolved. It didn't matter how volatility shifted. It didn't matter what structure formed. It didn't matter what new information appeared. I was anchored to the first idea, anchored to the first level, anchored to the first expectation, anchored to the belief that the market should behave a certain way. And this anchor didn't just influence my decisions. It dictated them, quietly, subtly, powerfully. It created a prison made of my own expectations, a prison where the chart would move the context, would shift the conditions, would change, but my target stayed the same. I want to tell you something that took me years to understand. The market is allowed to change, but I wasn't. I stayed fixed in a moving environment, rigid in a fluid world, committed to a number that was no longer relevant. This was anchoring bias. And it controlled me far more than any technical pattern ever did. I used to believe that being disciplined meant holding firm to my initial plan. I used to believe that changing my target meant I was being emotional. I used to believe that adjusting my expectations meant I lacked conviction. I used to believe that staying loyal to my first idea was the mark of a strong trader. But loyalty is dangerous when the market is evolving second by second. What I thought was discipline was actually rigidity. What I thought was conviction was actually denial. What I thought was confidence was actually ego refusing to adapt. I want to paint a moment for you, a moment every trader knows. You enter a trade. You feel confident. You set your target. You imagine the move unfolding perfectly. You visualize the profit. You anchor to that outcome. But then the market changes. Momentum shifts. Volume dries up. A new structure forms. A rejection appears. The character of the move weakens. And even though everything in front of you is telling you that your initial target is no longer realistic, you hold on to it anyway. Not because the market supports it, but because your mind does. You become attached to the first number you saw, the first expectation you set, the first version of reality you believed in. This is anchoring, not to truth, not to data, but to memory, to the past, to the idea you want to be right. I think about all the trades I ruined, not because I entered poorly, but because I refused to update my expectations. I held winners too long because I was anchored to a higher target that no longer made sense. I let small gains turn into losses because I was waiting for the market to return to a level that only mattered in my imagination. I gave back profit because I was attached to a version of the trade that existed only at the moment I entered. My mind was living in the past while the market was living in the present. And this mismatch, this disconnect, is where most traders lose. Anchoring bias is subtle. It doesn't scream at you like fear. It doesn't rush you like greed. It doesn't shake you like panic. It whispers. It nudges. It reassures you that your first idea was right even when evidence is showing otherwise. It makes you believe that adapting is weakness and staying committed is strength. But in trading, the opposite is true. Adaptation is strength. Attachment is weakness. I want to be honest with you, the hardest part of overcoming anchoring bias was not learning the charts. It was learning myself. It was realizing that the human mind is deeply uncomfortable with changing its beliefs, uncomfortable with abandoning the first idea, uncomfortable with letting go of expectations that felt right in the moment they were created. There's a reason for this. The first number the mind sees becomes the reference point, the anchor. Every new piece of information gets distorted to protect that first impression. It's not a trading flaw. It's a cognitive design. Your brain was built to anchor, built to cling to first assumptions, built to trust initial conditions even when reality changes. Because in the real world, in survival and danger, in nature, reacting quickly to the first piece of information could save your life. But in trading, it destroys it. The market isn't a predator chasing you. It's a system expressing probabilities. And probabilities shift. Targets shift. Context shifts. Momentum shifts. Everything is in motion. But the mind wants things to stay the same. This is the conflict. This is the battle. This is the psychological war that happens inside every trader who tries to adapt to a world their brain wants to freeze in place. Anchoring bias isn't about numbers. It's about identity. It's about certainty. It's about trying to force predictability in an unpredictable world. It's about clinging to the illusion that if you hold onto your first idea tightly enough, the market will eventually return and validate you. But the market doesn't validate traders. It exposes them. And anchoring bias exposes one thing above all: the inability to let go of outdated beliefs. In the next part, I want to walk you deeper into the emotional patterns behind anchoring bias, why the mind clings, why it refuses to update, why it resists new evidence, and why traders end up trapped in levels, targets, and expectations that no longer belong to the present moment. There's a strange comfort in the first idea I hold on to, a strange safety in the first level I draw, a strange loyalty to the first expectation I create. It feels familiar, stable, trustworthy, and that familiarity becomes a trap. Because the moment I anchor to a number, I stop seeing the market for what it is and start seeing it for what I want it to be. Anchoring bias is not loud. It doesn't shake me violently. It doesn't flood my mind with panic. It works quietly, silently, softly, like a whisper crawling into the edges of my perception, changing the way I interpret everything that comes after. It's the voice that says your target is still valid. Don't adjust it. Your entry is important. The market should respect it. That level mattered earlier, so it must still matter now. This should reverse here because it did before. But the market does not owe me consistency. It does not owe me symmetry. It does not owe me repetition. It does not owe me anything. The market evolves. It shifts on every candle. It breathes with every wave of liquidity. It changes its character without warning. It adapts to new information instantly. But my mind struggles to do the same. And that struggle shapes the way I respond. When I'm anchored to a price, I interpret every tiny movement through the lens of that anchor. If price moves toward my target, I feel validated. If price moves away, I feel threatened. If price consolidates, I feel impatient. But none of these emotions come from the chart. They come from the anchor. The anchor becomes the filter through which I see the entire market. A filter created not by data, not by context, not by probability, but by the first expectation I set. And here's the truth that hurts. My first idea is often my worst one. Not because I'm incompetent, not because I'm reckless, not because I'm unskilled, but because my first idea was formed before the market revealed its true nature. Anchoring bias traps me in the earliest, weakest version of my analysis. I once entered a trade that moved in my favor beautifully. Clean structure, strong momentum, everything lined up. But my target was too high, too ambitious, too anchored to the ideal scenario I imagined at the start. The market began showing signs of slowing. Momentum faded, volume shifted, rejection started appearing. The character of the move changed. Everything was telling me to adapt, to tighten, to secure profit, to acknowledge what the market was showing me now. But I ignored it because I was anchored to the target I had set earlier, a target that existed in a version of the chart that no longer existed. And I watched a winning trade turn into break even, and then into red, and then into a loss that never should have happened. Not because the strategy was wrong, not because the market was unfair, but because I refused to update my expectations. Anchoring bias turns profitable traders into frustrated ones. It turns clarity into confusion. It turns dynamic thinking into rigid stubbornness. It turns opportunity into regret. I've been there so many times, holding on to a target long after the market has told me it's invalid, holding on to a level long after liquidity has moved elsewhere, holding on to a belief long after the chart has disproven it. And every time the pain comes from the same place, I was trading the past while the market was operating in the present. Anchoring bias isn't just about a number. It's about emotional commitment, ego commitment, identity commitment. When I anchor to a target, I anchor a part of myself to it as well. A part that doesn't want to admit that the first version of my idea was incomplete. My ego hates updating expectations because updating expectations feels like admitting that the first expectation was flawed. But trading is not a test of perfect predictions. It's a test of adaptive thinking. And adaptability requires something. The ego resists the willingness to change my mind. There's a psychological discomfort that comes with changing my target. It feels like instability. It feels like uncertainty. It feels like stepping into unfamiliar terrain. My mind would rather cling to the old target, even if it's clearly unrealistic, because the old target feels safe. The danger of anchoring bias is not in the number itself. It's in the emotional attachment that forms around it. The mind loves certainty. The market offers none. And anchoring bias is the mind's attempt to create certainty where none exists. But this false certainty comes at a high cost. It costs me profit. It costs me clarity. It costs me adaptability. It costs me the ability to see the chart objectively. It costs me the ability to trade what's happening instead of what I wish was happening. Anchoring bias is a war between the part of me that wants stability and the market that refuses to provide it. And the longer I stay anchored, the deeper the disconnect becomes. The harder it is to adapt. The more emotional the trade becomes, the more personal it feels, the less objective I become. Anchoring bias doesn't just distort my targets, it distorts my identity as a trader. In the next part, I want to take you deeper into the heart of this bias, into the emotional mechanics that make it so powerful, so subtle, and so dangerously convincing. I want to show you why the mind clings to outdated levels, why it refuses to update even in the face of evidence, and how this attachment silently sabotages my ability to trade with clarity and precision. There is a moment in every trade when the market reveals a new truth, a truth that didn't exist when I first entered. Maybe it shows strength I didn't expect. Maybe it reveals weakness I didn't want to see. Maybe it shifts momentum or structure or rhythm. Maybe a pattern breaks. Maybe liquidity changes direction. Maybe a level loses significance. But anchoring bias blinds me to that truth, because once I am anchored, I stop seeing truth and start seeing confirmation. Anchoring bias makes the mind selective. It filters reality. It highlights what supports the original expectation and ignores what contradicts it. I remember watching trades that clearly wanted to reverse, clearly wanted to break structure, clearly wanted to shift direction, and yet I stayed loyal to my first interpretation. Why? Because every sign of weakness felt like an inconvenience. Every shift in character felt like noise. Every change in the market felt like something temporary instead of something meaningful. Anchoring bias turns me into a prisoner of my initial belief. And what's strange is that the more evidence appears against my anchor, the more desperately my mind tries to defend it. This is the emotional trap. The deeper I get into the trade, the more I want the first idea to be right. The more I cling to the target. The more I justify sticking to the plan, even when the plan is outdated. It becomes a kind of psychological inertia, a momentum of belief that refuses to stop even when reality demands it. I tell myself, just give it time. The market will come back. The pullback is normal. It's just consolidating. My level is still strong. It needs a bit more patience. But deep down, I know the truth. These are not observations. These are rationalizations. Anchoring bias convinces me that the market is wrong and my initial target is right. I've watched traders, myself included, sit through perfect opportunities to secure profit, all because we were waiting for the target we imagined. Not the target the market was offering, not the target the context supported, not the target aligned with what was happening now. We were waiting for a fantasy, a memory, a ghost of a number that no longer mattered. Anchoring turns confidence into stubbornness. It turns analysis into attachment. It turns opportunity into regret. The painful irony is this: the market often gives me what I need, but I reject it because I'm waiting for what I wanted. I once had a trade that reached a beautiful profit zone. Everything in the present moment told me it was time to adapt, to shift my target lower, to secure the win, to respect the changing landscape. But my mind said, no, your original target is higher. Stick with it. And so I stayed. I stayed while momentum weakened. I stayed while liquidity thinned. I stayed while reversal signs intensified. I stayed until the market reversed completely and turned a strong winner into a loss. It wasn't the chart that betrayed me. It was my anchor. Anchoring bias does not only affect targets, it affects stops, it affects expectations, it affects perception, it affects confidence, it affects the way I interpret every candle that forms. Anchoring bias turns the first version of the trade into the only version I'm willing to see. But there is a deeper layer one that most traders never explore. Anchoring bias is not simply about sticking to numbers, it's about protecting identity. The first idea I form in a trade is not just a thought, it becomes a part of me, a part of my ego, a part of my self-image as a trader. So when the market challenges that idea, it feels like it's challenging me, challenging my intelligence, challenging my skill, challenging my worth. Updating my target or adjusting my stop or changing my plan feels like admitting that the first version of me was wrong, but that belief is poison because the first version of me had less information than the version of me that exists now. Refusing to update my expectations because of ego is like refusing to update my software because I'm attached to the old version. This is the emotional root of anchoring bias. I cling to the first version of reality because it feels like the safest version, the most familiar version, the version where I felt confident, the version I created intentionally, the version I want to be right. But trading is not about proving myself right. It's about aligning myself with what is right now. And that requires flexibility, humility, awareness, presence. Adaptation is not a weakness. Adaptation is the highest form of intelligence. The trader who adapts survives. The trader who anchors suffers. And the market, in its quiet neutrality, does not care which one I choose. In the next part, I want to walk you into the transformation, the shift in perspective that freed me from anchoring bias. The shift that allowed me to create targets that adapt, not remain fixed. Targets that breathe with the market. Targets that evolve with structure. Targets based on reality, not memory. This is where everything changes. There was a moment in my trading journey when I realized that the chart wasn't fighting me. The market wasn't resisting me. Price wasn't punishing me. I was fighting myself. I was resisting myself. I was punishing myself because I was clinging to expectations that no longer matched the reality unfolding in front of me. This is the heart of anchoring bias. I hold onto a past version of the market while the market moves on without me. And so piece by piece, I began to unlearn the rigidity that kept me trapped. I began to see that adaptability is not emotional instability, it is emotional intelligence. I began to understand that a target is not a promise, it is a hypothesis, a possibility, a starting point, not a prison. The first step toward breaking anchoring bias was giving myself permission to change my mind, to admit that new information matters, to admit that context evolves, to admit that the market reveals more truth in the present moment than it ever does in the moment I enter, because the entry was made in the past. The trade must be managed in the now. I learned to ask myself a single powerful question: what is true now? Not what was true 5 minutes ago, not what was true at entry, not what was true when I drew that level, not what was true when I imagined the target. What is true right now? This question became my anchor, my real anchor, not to a number, but to the present moment. When I asked it honestly, I saw the chart differently. I saw opportunities I used to miss. I saw danger earlier. I saw shifts in character clearly. I saw profit windows more objectively. And slowly, I began to build targets that adapt to the market, not targets that force the market to adapt to me. This became a mindset shift, a psychological evolution, a new identity forming beneath the old one. I stopped asking, will it hit my target, and began asking, does my target still make sense? I stopped saying it should go here and began saying, what is the market showing me? I stopped thinking, I hope it reaches that level, and started thinking the context will tell me where to stop. It was the first time in my trading life that I truly felt free, because I was no longer chained to my expectations. I was flowing with the market, not resisting it. I was listening to what the chart was communicating instead of imposing my desires onto it. I was treating my initial idea as an opening perspective, not a fixed truth. And then something remarkable happened. My exits became cleaner. My targets became more accurate. My stress decreased. My emotional swings softened. My trading felt calm even in volatile conditions, because adaptability brought peace, flexibility brought clarity, presence brought truth. Anchoring bias thrives in rigidity. But rigidity has no place in a market that breathes, shifts, reacts, and evolves every second. So I built a simple internal system, a mental framework that I carry into every trade. I call it the adaptive target shift. And it begins like this: step 1, detach from the initial idea. I remind myself that the first target was formed with incomplete information. Step 2, reread the market with fresh eyes, as if I have never seen the chart before, as if this moment is the only moment that matters. Step 3, let context guide the target. Momentum, volatility, structure, liquidity. These shape the true exit. Step 4, drop any expectation rooted in the past. If the target no longer fits the environment, it must evolve. Step 5, respect the present more than the prediction. What the chart is showing me now is always more valuable than what I believed earlier. In these steps, I found freedom. Freedom from rigidity. Freedom from stubbornness. Freedom from my own mind. I realized something profound. A fixed target in a moving market is a form of self-sabotage. A fixed belief in a world of constant change is an emotional trap. Anchoring bias isn't about numbers. It's about identity. It's about fear. It's about attachment to the past. It's about resisting the truth because the truth requires flexibility. But the market does not reward those who cling to what was. It rewards those who respond to what is. It rewards present moment awareness. It rewards updated expectations. It rewards fluid thinking. It rewards traders who release the past quickly and cleanly. And now I want to leave you with a realization that changed everything for me. The market is always changing, and so must I. A target that doesn't adapt becomes a trap. A level that doesn't evolve becomes a lie. A belief that doesn't update becomes a burden. Anchoring bias is not defeated by strength, by certainty, or by stubbornness. It is defeated by awareness, by flexibility, by humility, by the willingness to rewrite the story as the market unfolds. The market moves, the context shifts, the truth changes. And I have learned to change with it, because a trader who adapts is a trader who survives. A trader who adapts is a trader who grows. A trader who adapts is a trader who becomes free. And in the end, freedom is what this entire journey is about. Freedom from outdated expectations, freedom from rigid thinking, freedom from the anchors I once mistook for certainty. I no longer cling to the first number. I no longer worship the first target. I no longer obey outdated ideas. I trade what is true now. I set targets that breathe with the market. I release any anchor that tries to hold me to the past. Because the market is allowed to change, and now finally, so am I. If you've made it this far, then you've already taken the first step toward breaking one of the most subtle and destructive biases in trading. Anchoring isn't about numbers. It's about identity. About the part of you that clings to the first idea because it feels familiar, comfortable, safe. But trading is not a world that stays still. It shifts, moves, breathes, evolves. And to survive in a moving market, your mind must move too. Targets are not promises. Levels are not laws. Your first idea is not the truth. The only truth is what the market is showing you right now in this moment. The traders who grow the traders, who last the traders, who rise, are the ones who let their expectations adapt as quickly as the market does. Carry this with you. A target that doesn't evolve becomes a trap. A belief that doesn't update becomes a burden. And an anchor you refuse to release will always hold you back. If this message brought you clarity, if it helped you see your own patterns more clearly, I invite you to stay on this journey. Because here we don't chase the market. We understand the mind behind every decision. This is mind over markets. And your evolution has already begun.